And we are live with Jasmine Lane, educator, English teacher, columnist for Citizen Ed Education Week, among others. She has her own blog, jasmineteaches.wordpress.com. This is a very, very serious sister because she is not one of the teachers that just writes things that are about the emotions of teaching and the emotions of our kids and the non-educational interventions that our kids need. She writes specifically about teaching, and not just teaching, but teaching well. Good morning, Jasmine.
Good morning. Thank you for that super kind introduction.
I think it's on the spot. You know, sometimes you give introductions and they're not true. I try to be like as true as possible with you. I think the thing that anybody's going to figure out within 10 minutes of reading your blog, following you on Twitter, which I think that everybody should do, or reading the articles and the blog posts that you write, is that you do have a focus on pedagogy. How do we teach kids, and are we good at it? Which to me is the missing part of education commentary right now, because we want to talk about so much about the lives of the kids, which is really important. Don't get me wrong, anyone listening, don't throw any stones. But if you can't teach and you don't understand the craft of teaching and your kids can't read, I don't know. I want to know what love is. I want somebody to show me. Jasmine, I want to show you a quick clip and ask you, and this may not be fair. It's just a quick clip that we took out of a previous show with Citizen Ed. And I'm only showing you this to get your reaction to it because it caused a lot of conversation with teachers specifically who were attempting to navigate the line between wanting to be very good racial allies in the classroom while also wanting to make sure that they had the right PD to actually be good teachers. So this is a clip from Jay Wamstead, who I'm looking forward to doing more shows with. Jay is actually really, really, really great guy and made me think this day. I'm calling this the would you rather quote. So here it is. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it. I hope you'll be able to hear it. Let me see.
Would you rather have a very well documented, moves the needle, awesome teacher who you suspected was racist? Or would you rather have an anti-racist teacher who you knew was anti-racist somehow, but you knew nothing about their pedagogical skills?
I'm going to pick A.
Okay.
And I'm going to pick A because I think most of you all are racist. I don't think you're redeemable in racism. I don't think in my lifetime any of you are going to get the gold star. I think you're in progress. I appreciate your try. I appreciate the fact that you have good hearts, good minds. Some of you believe in Jesus, and you're making great attempts at not living out history anymore. I appreciate that. I also believe in evidence, and there is no evidence that I can see that says you're going to win that battle in your lifetime or mine, and that the best we can do is be friends. And my loving Jesus tells me I just need to accept where you are in your journey and do what God commands me to do, which is consider you a brother and consider you family, even though you're going to have this really problematic toxicity internally that you're fighting, that you're trying to find an antidote for. And sometimes it affects me, sometimes it doesn't. But I don't believe it's going to be cured in time for me to prioritize that over you just being good at what you do when I send my kid to you to teach. And I'll take a racist teacher who is effective at teaching reading and math, who gets my kid into college so that my kid can be a warrior and a revolutionary, in spite of that teacher's history, not because of it or because they became woke.
So it's that last part that got, I think that caused a little bit of issue, which was, I'll take a racist teacher who can teach and get my kid to proficiency and above so that they get into college and that they do well in life over a woke teacher or a wannabe woke teacher, or a teacher that's in pursuit of being woke, who actually isn't very strong pedagogically speaking. Help me out with this. I actually didn't expect the response from teachers. I didn't expect it to cause a fight amongst them, not me, because no one came at me saying Chris. They came at Jay basically saying to even ask the question is wrong. What would you say as an educator who focuses on pedagogy, who also is concerned about race and the things that we have to worry about as Black parents when we send our kids to a school, what do you say about a teacher being in pursuit of being woke, or a teacher who wants to be pedagogically strong but doesn't have as much of a woke focus?
What I would say is I think it's better to focus on enhancing your instructional strategies rather than sitting in circles reading White Fragility.
See, good morning. We just started already. Fireworks.
Sorry,
There
that's it's a philosophical debate. It's dependent on like changing your mind in the hopes that somehow it'll trickle down to the way that you teach my kids how to read or to do math. And there's just no evidence that that is happening. I mean, you can look up some of the, I guess I'm not going to call them out by name, but some of the loudest people on Twitter who are like, yeah, anti-racism, like that's what's going to fix the schools. They don't work in schools where the kids are kind of dealing with, they don't work in schools with a lot of Black kids.
I love it when people on my show say, I'm not going to call out names. Damn it.
I mean, you can just look up the schools that they work in, and they work in schools with like 7% of the kids are, students of color, or less than that, or 20% is free and reduced lunch. Like they don't face the same issues that someone like me does in the schools that I work in. And that's not to say that, all of those, obviously the issues around race are not insignificant, but if I had to choose something to focus on, I think that it'd be better to teach those teachers, like, this is actually how you teach a complex text. This is how you teach it to students who, aren't necessarily already at that level. And like, that's more of a gateway, because what I've seen is that the racism shows up a lot more in the types of assignments assigned, the work that they're giving our kids.
Have you seen circles of people, like when you talk about the circles that are sitting around talking about the White Fragility book, do you see them also doing the circles around things like the science of reading?
No.
That sounds like a problem.
They're mostly doing like choice books of like low level young adult literature is usually what you find.
And when you say choice books, and what does that mean? Choice books.
Instead of the teacher, like if you remember your English class, whether or not it was good, you're reading a book together, the teacher is telling you things about it. And, if they do any discussions, whatever, like that's what a traditional English classroom is. The teacher's teaching you things with their knowledge. But if you're in the classroom with choice, the teacher doesn't teach you any books. You kind of just pick one that you like, and you practice skills. And it's more just about getting you to love reading rather than like being able to navigate things that maybe you're unfamiliar with.
Which seems like a recipe for dumbing down. And that's an old phrase. Maybe there's a new way of saying it, but that just seems like a recipe for actually keeping kids at a level below where they should be. Not even should be. The idea that there's so many kids walking in classes every day that have so much more potential than what the adults think that they have, to me, appears to be a problem.
Yep. I don't remember where I said this, but I'm like, there are millions of brilliant Black children all around this country. I'm not exceptional. I just happen to have teachers that believed in me. And that's not the case for a lot of kids. And that's what I'm kind of trying to push back on. I'm like, if you teach them how to do it, they can do it. But the teaching is not happening in a way that's effective.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that is specifically because, like where we live, very obviously, you might have Black kids that are not the majority in the schools that they're in. There's some schools where they are the majority, but there are a lot of schools where they're not. And it might be assumed that, hey, the instruction is going well for everybody else. If it's not going well for them, it might have to do with them more than it does us. Is that what you think is largely behind the dumbing down?
Yeah, I think so. Part of the pedagogical instruction that we get in like ed school is not really catered to, teaching kids who maybe are learning English as an additional language, or kids with IEPs, or kids who have been, systematically left behind. So you're kind of catering to the students who, by some chance, already are doing well. And so when you're working in a school where, maybe the kids that have been left behind are like the minority, it's easy to get that misconstrued, or like kind of have the data be punched down. Like 70% of our school is on grade level, but the other 30% is all the Black kids. So what you're doing isn't really working for the kids that would actually need it. Someone told me this. They're like, those teachers could sit on their desk and twiddle their thumbs, and most of the kids in the classroom would figure it out because they have parents that, can figure it out for them or get them tutoring or something.
Yeah, we, Minneapolis, you're obviously here in the Twin Cities, so Minneapolis. And Minneapolis years ago, the district hired Cambridge to come in and do a 3-day deep dive in each school. So Cambridge team was really fantastic. They were like an amazing group. They would come in and they would go through all of your stuff, your teaching, your materials, your pedagogical stuff, everything, like how you did meetings, everything. And then every school got a feedback report, a report that helped them understand, like, this really honest third party deep dive into this is what this is what's up with your school. The short story is that the schools that we rated as the best, we had 2 or 3 schools that were the schools in the district that everybody wanted to get into, and the rest were kind of up for grabs. Those 3 schools, Cambridge said, your teachers are a little bit too preoccupied with relying on the skills that kids bring to schools with them already. Yep. So there were a lot of worksheets. There were a lot of non-teaching but fun activities for those kids. And here's the real kicker, shocker. And I found this out because one of the parents at that school told me, and the kids were all proficient, but not making a year's worth of growth. So they were all passing well. They were all passing the test. They were above proficiency,
but not because of school.
Not because of school. And the longer you left them in a school like that, they would keep being proficient, but they would keep not living up to their real potential. The parent who told me that told me it in a backhanded way. She was basically saying, well, I'm not like some of those other parents who left the schools, the city, and went to the suburbs for the Tony schools. I stayed in the city and went to this Tony city school. And she's like, and we don't, I have to live with the fact that my kids aren't even making a year's growth, but it's worth it because of the social interactions that they have. And, they're getting a real city education and blah, 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 whatever. I had to stop and say, wait, what? Go back to that part where you said they're not making a year's growth and you know it. And she's like, as long as they're proficient and having a good time, I'm happy. And I thought to myself, well, wow, that's new on me. But what about when they're not even they're not even proficient, right? Because in the same city 3 miles away, there was a school that had 0 proficiency in math. And all of the people that were proficient in reading were girls. There was not a single boy in that school that was proficient in reading, right? And I was like, well, listen, I'm going to let you go with your school that, where everybody's proficient, but it ain't growing. But we're going to go over here and work with this starter prison and figure out what's going on with our kids. And Jasmine, it would probably make your head spin. The kids in what I call the starter prison, not very nicely. There was a lot of talk about how hungry they were, how we need to bring them extra food and keep it in our desks to give to them throughout the day and stuff like that. Very little teaching about the fact that the top level of math that they offered in that school was 4 levels below every other high school. That the reading was disjointed, that they had changed the curriculum multiple times, that the principal sat in her office all day long and teachers couldn't access her throughout the entire day. So you wrote this article about trade-offs, and this does kind of lead into your article, because what parents at that who weren't going to that starter prison I just told you about were jumping ship and going to the suburbs, but staying in the neighborhood. And they talked about this trade-off a little bit that you're alluding to in your article between, we're going to send them out to the white suburbs and they're going to be equity stripped, but at least they're going to be able to get a good education, get into college, versus we could keep them here in the school where they're more comfortable with people that look like them and they don't feel like the other, but they're not going to be able to learn to read or write. And that's a trade-off. You have this article called "Don't Make Black Families Choose Between Academics and Justice." Tell me a little bit about the origin of this article and your main point that you're making here.
So I kind of wrote that around the time so off the edge of COVID, teaching, distance learning, whatever, and then the murder of George Floyd. So kind of just this whole educators everywhere kind of talking like, how am I going to talk to my kids about this? And so it was really just my stamp about like hearing the discussions of so many people on Twitter, I guess, just saying like, forget the grades, there's a pandemic going on, like the kids can't learn right now, they're so traumatized. And I'm just like, none of you guys really get what this is like for Black families, Black teachers, and Black kids, because you're just out of sync. And so that's kind of why I was writing this article.
And when you say one of the things that got you was that there was this wanting to retreat on things like grades, and I saw things like testing. I mean, what's your point about that? Was your point like, no, let's just still give grades the way we always gave them, and let's test them the way that we always test them. Let's find them in the middle of the street and give them a coronavirus test and a standardized test at the same time?
No, of course not.
Okay.
That would just be cruel. There, you know what I mean? Like, there is, in this time, you have to be considerate of what's going on in their lives, what might be, because we really don't know. Going into this school year, and my idea as a teacher is like, I can't control what happens outside of my classroom. I can't control their home lives. I can't control any of that, but I can control, what happens. But now we can't. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I should just assume for them that they can't do anything. I'm going to do my best. And because I've opened up a line of communication for them, they can decide, the students themselves or their parents, they can tell me like, this is going on in our family. We might not be able to do this. But to just say like, I'm going to decide for them that they can't, I think that is really kind of overstepping your bounds and stepping out of your place as a teacher. It's not my job to decide what you can and can't do in your home, because I don't know what it's like.
Yeah, you have a quote here where you say, yes, there's trauma from pandemic fear, from centuries of racism and violence. Yep. We will likely need a trauma-informed approach as school begins in some form again. When school begins in some form again. Some say that means educators should let relationships be the focus, but that does not necessarily mean relationships outside of content. The I teach kids, not content approach. I would reframe that to say I teach students content. Boy, that's a strange nuance. I hope I'm getting it right. They're saying I teach kids, not content, right? Mm-hmm. Which is an approach. And you're saying just reframe it a little bit and say I teach kids. No, I teach students content. That's yep. my job, and my students trust me to do it. Yep. That might sound like a very slim nuance to some. Just define that for me. Yeah, tell me. Yeah, it's not, because the two words, the small word difference there means a world of difference in the way that you're teaching. So tell me, what's the nuance there?
So the way that I see the I teach kids, not content, is what you're teaching them isn't really that important. It doesn't really matter if they if they can like read a Shakespeare play. I'm just saying books off the top of my head.
Shakespeare's boring. Keep going.
It just matters, if they find a book that they love, or if they have friends in the classroom, or if they feel like wanted. Like, that's like my primary concern with people who might say I teach kids, not content. And when I reframed it, I say like, actually, the content that I am teaching matters, and I communicate that to my students, and they know, even if they don't think it's true, they understand that I'm placing a premium on their learning. That is my primary focus, and they know that. And they know that I'm there to support them, and that I'm aware of how they're doing, and I know where they are, and I'm not just, negating the point. I'm just saying like, just come and we're just going to play games, or just come and, I'm going to put you on your Chromebooks and just kind of research things that you like. That's not at all what I do. And so it's a really small flip of words, but it's a totally different approach in the classroom, and just how you see your relationship to students. I don't care about Timmy's favorite color, but I do care if Timmy can read.
That makes you so mean, Miss Lane. It's mean.
Oh, well, my kids, they learned how to write a literary analysis essay after having never written one in the 10th grade, and I am proud of that. I'm like, that's what they learned. they learned other things too, because I do care about my kids, but I care about their learning. And that's how I show them that I care.
Seems to me that it would be hard to not fall into the deficit language if you really can't teach and if you haven't been prepared. And I think people get nervous if you say, when a teacher can't teach, because that's a criticism. That's a really harsh criticism if you're calling yourself a teacher to hear, and it changes the conversation. I have to say it that way because I'm a parent. I don't really care about your feelings, right? Like I care about whether you can teach or not, right? So I'm not the one to talk to, I guess, if the conversation is centered around how can we center the feelings of teachers and help them be better. I'm the person to talk to when you get past that point to say, what do parents expect from schools and from their teachers as partners in the educational process? But assuming that I was that person who cared about the feelings of teachers and how we center what it is that they believe. David Weingarten has a question here that I think actually goes right to the heart of it. He stamps it right from the beginning. Chris Stewart. Now, David, why you got to call a brother by his government name from the get-go? Just Chris Stewart. Like, you've known me for years. Can you just say Chris, man? Can you ask Jasmine to discuss her college, how college prepares or doesn't prepare teachers? And I would think that this is a part of saying, listen, if you're a teacher who can't teach, it's not all on the fact that you're a bad person or something like that. Your ed school probably ripped you off a little bit. So let's start there. How might that be a problem, the ed school problem?
I mean, they're just not aligned to evidence at all about how to teach students best. My literature methods course, we didn't really learn how to teach literature. We kind of just, every person took a book and we made a lesson plan. And then we talked a lot about critical theory, which is important, but I didn't learn how to teach books, which is my job. My writing methods class, we didn't learn how to teach essays. We learned how to make assignments instead of essays. And then my reading methods class, we didn't learn at all about the science of reading. I didn't really learn about fluency. We really just learned about, like, if kids are struggling to read, it's because they just don't like the book, rather than any underlying issues of, phonics, lagging fluency, decoding issues. College does not prepare. My college did not prepare me to be a teacher. And if you look at what's the acronym, the National Council for NCTQ, if you look at their evaluation of colleges nationally, especially teacher colleges, you'll see the same issues come up. My university got a C, and it's one of the best in the state. In the country. And so if the best is getting a C, imagine what other people are getting, the education that other people are getting.
I mean, how did you feel? Like, you're talking about a report that gets put out by the National Council of Teacher Equality every year. People go to their website and see it. It rates colleges of education on different measures. How did you feel as a student realizing that the one that you went to got a C? Or first of all, did you already kind of know? Were you already kind of suspicious? Like, wow, this school seems to suck a little bit.
Well, I mean, at the beginning of my teacher program, because I had already I spent a year as a paraprofessional in a high-performing charter school. And then at the same time, I was also, when I was in my teacher program, I was still working at that same charter school. So I just started to see the disconnect between what I was learning in class and what I was actually doing in this school. And so the more I kind of just started to interrogate what I was being taught, I just saw how it didn't align with, with just teaching kids well. And the more you just kind of go down that rabbit hole, and, if you read like Basic Journalism by like Emily Hanford, you kind of just start to see like a lot of assumptions that you make about what's happening in other schools or what's happening in elementary schools. That's kind of what set me off, because I remember sitting on the carpet doing my phonics flashcards with my teachers, doing the consonant vowel consonant E and practicing and drilling, doing my math facts. And so I just assumed that all other students were getting that, and they're not. And so that's kind of what really keyed me in that, ed schools are kind of not what they're supposed to be. They don't train teachers to be successful on their first day. I don't think they do.
What was an example of something that you bumped into where you thought, hey, these two things aren't meshing between what I taught and what should be taught in classrooms?
I mean, one example is the approaching of how we approach teaching writing. My writing methods class, like there wasn't really anything about like, working at the sentence level, or even like, here's how to teach literary analysis. Here's how to teach like thematic analysis. There was nothing like that. It was just, authentic writing, which basically means like whatever they're good at already, kind of take that and make it something that they can do. And that was when I had, been maybe reading research and stuff for maybe 3 months. But that was like a big key into me. I'm just like, I'm not learning how to teach writing. I'm just learning how to make assignments that aren't writing so that they can do them well.
And is it that those things weren't covered because there was a lot of more important kind of theoretical or
Yes.
Yeah. So background stuff to deal with. And the assumption is that you're going to learn some of that. I don't know how you're going to learn science-based instructional practices and pedagogy once you get to the school. Why the expectation would be, but do you think
that's the expectation at all.
What's that?
I don't think the expectation is that you learn like pedagogically sound knowledge once you get to school. I think it's more just like you want to be a teacher because like you love being in the classroom and you're so destined for this work. So you'll figure it out. And that's why so many teachers leave, because it's just like, it's overwhelming if you don't have any kind of grasp on how to do your job. So you're trying to teach literature and teach reading and teach writing all at the same time, not having been trained to do that. And that's really why I think that people go into doing those like literature circles and the young adult choice novels, because they don't know, they haven't been taught how to do the other things, and they found that it works and the kids are happy. So why not?
So they take the path of least resistance on
Yes,
that one.
Absolutely.
And then kids pay the price.
Yep. The kids are always the ones that pay the price. The teachers, like I'm critical of teachers because I'm a teacher, and I've seen some things from my very short time in traditional public education. There's kind of just after a certain amount of time of like trying and the things that you're doing aren't working for the kids that you're working with, you kind of just resign yourself to like, this is what it is, and you stop trying. And then when you stop trying, your kids pick up on that. So they know that you don't care. So then they stop caring. And then it just creates this school culture of, no one really cares about my learning. I'm just here and I'm just waiting to, just be done. And then again, like Eric Lenz just put that comment up about school-based PD. You don't get PD about instruction. We had one about trauma-informed, which we watched a kid punch a hole through a glass window. And then she told us that being like clean was a value of the middle class.
What?
Yeah, she had like, these are tenets of white supremacy. Valuing college, being on time, valuing cleanliness. And I was so shocked that I couldn't even say anything. And I just turned to the person next to me and I was like, I like almost started to like yell at her. I'm like, who do you think you are to say that lower class people don't want to be clean?
Wait a second. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. This is PD?
Yep.
And this is PD specifically around trauma-informed schooling?
Yep.
And it's a middle-class, college-educated person leading the thing, telling other college-educated middle-class people that underclass people, working-class people, and lower middle-class people probably place a lesser value on being clean.
Yes.
And
I have a picture on my phone because I was just like, they cannot bring this person back.
Hell to the gnaw. Has she ever heard of Pine Sol? Negro made Pine Sol what it is today. What the hell is wrong with her?
Yeah, but that was, that's part of the trauma informed. It's just like, you're placing your middle class values on these kids that aren't middle class.
See, this is the part that gets under my skin. Going through the archives in Minneapolis public schools, once I found all of their old desegregation training packets, and they had packets to teach teachers about Indians. And the packets, because, we had a high American Indian population in the district. So they had these special trainings for them, run off on those Xerox things or whatever. And I'm reading through them and I'm like, wow, y'all made a whole generation of teachers dumb about the people that they were serving. And then I got to the other ones that were about working with kids in poverty. And this is from years ago. And the thing that hit me was I was at the time railing on Ruby Payne, her whole kind of stuff around the framework for poverty that teachers were taught for years and years and years. But it had a predecessor. And if it had a predecessor, it may have had a descendant. And what you just told me is a little bit unnerving in that even now when we're talking about trauma-informed educational practices or PD, it has a sense in it to me of that Ruby Payne stuff, because what you just told me feels very deficit. And it feels weird, like teach teachers that they value cleanliness less. Wow. So when you're sitting in something like that and you're watching that, are you watching other people around you who are like shaking their head, feeling like they're really getting the word of Jesus in education? When
like, oh my God, I had no idea. And I'm like, no. Like,
and you still have no idea.
Like, you don't know. Ignore, delete from your brain.
Wow, that is so dispiriting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a little bit shocked by it, honestly, because as cynical as I am, I'm still shocked by that person getting up that morning thinking they were about to deliver a real word to people, and they said that.
We paid them to do that too.
Ooh. Well, see, now you shouldn't have told me that part, because I might have a different job come next week, just so you know. You might have me somewhere delivering PD talking about, what the kids need? They need soap. You got to teach them soap. Forget all that food stuff y'all been talking about. They need soap. Man, it gets dumber and dumber and dumber in education, and I just can't believe it. You said you went to a high-powered charter school and taught. What I have observed about some charter schools in small environments is that many of their teachers come in very green and very inexperienced. And it's part of the, I don't know what you would call the process of acclimating to the school or the building, but it's part of the onboarding to get some strategies that help you be a better teacher faster. Did you encounter that what you didn't get in ed school, you were getting part of it in the school that you came to, the high performing school? Yeah.
I mean, everything that not everything, but the basis that I have for being a strong educator was developed in that school. I credit that school, even though we don't have the best of relationship right now for other reasons. I credit that school with a lot of the success that I have now. Just believing that kids can do well if you just teach them. That was 100% free and reduced lunch, 90%, maybe 80% Somali, 15% African American, 5% Latino. I think we used to have one white kid, but then he left. And we were a high performing charter school, and we were beating the odds year after year. And it was just because the teachers believed that they could, and they had the tools, the pedagogical tools to believe that our kids could learn, and to teach them well. And we had systems in place, that it wasn't perfect, because no school is perfect, but I learned a lot being at that school. And I take a lot of, people like to hate on Teach Like a Champion, but I learned about that book there. And those are the things that I bring to my classroom now.
People really do hate on that book a lot. Again, as an outsider, like I'm very much a spectator watching you guys in education battle it out with your y'all. It's interesting to just watch the disagreements. I'm always interested in how much more interesting the disagreements about how to teach are than the political stuff, like the political policies about whether or not we should have, schools that aren't district schools, should we have charter schools, whatever. Those get to be very uninteresting. It's nice to see educators actually wrangle each other on that's not what the science says about how you teach reading, whether you should teach phonics or not, how you get kids to be numeric early and all that stuff. That's interesting to me because that's educators dealing with their craft rather than the other stuff, which actually is fluff to me. It's sad that educators spend so much time in the fluff. But if you could win any battle, because you're an English teacher, if you could win any battle around the English, the way our kids are getting it, which battle would you win?
Dang. I don't know. I have to choose. I mean,
you don't really have to choose, but I like to make false choices so that people have put a stake in the ground.
I mean, if I just wish teachers knew how to teach complex text, and how important background knowledge is to that, and how to build on students' previous knowledge and incorporate that with the new stuff that you're teaching them, so that they can access that book that you're studying together. That's what I do every day in all the books that we read. We studied Things Fall Apart. We studied Shakespeare. We studied Ballad of the Sad Cafe. Those are not easy books to read if you're not used to, if you don't have, years and years of reading practice. Like, you can't just pick it up and figure it out. But my kids did, because I had enough knowledge myself and enough tools to teach them, like, this is how you can get through this. And I did it. And that was my thing. I'm like, I did this. I came from this neighborhood, and I'm like, it didn't define me, and it doesn't have to define you. A lot of people say, like, your zip code determines your future. And I'm like, it doesn't have to. It just so happens that the people in those schools probably don't have, again, the pedagogical tools to teach kids who don't already come proficient. And so that's how that cycle starts.
So help me again, the battle that you would win, because you said it, and it gets so kind of technical for me in some ways to just like, I can act like, yeah, okay, I get that part 100%. Or, but it'll come up to me later where I'll be like, I didn't really get that part. So say it again.
The battle to win is understanding how to build on students' prior knowledge or what they already come to school with in order to leverage it with the difficult text that they're learning. And someone just said, you're assuming that the teacher can read the complex text themselves. Again, teacher expertise is important. A lot of teachers do not have a bachelor's degree in their content area, and that makes a difference.
Do you think that's really important?
Yes.
Is it more important in English than it is in others, or is it just, you just see it as important in general?
I think it's important in general. How can you teach a subject if you don't know it fairly deeply?
And is that, you think, more important in the lower grades, the middle grades, high school, or all of it? I've heard a little bit that, it's really not as important in elementary. I don't know that to be true, but
I don't know if that's true either, because so you get a bachelor's degree in teaching for most schools, then you get like a minor in something. But for elementary school, you don't really concentrate on anything. You kind of just, your degree is teaching. And so, maybe you are okay with fractions, but you don't really know how to teach fractions. So you being unsure about how to teach fractions transfers over to your students, and fractions are one of those gatekeepers in math. So I don't know if you need to have a bachelor's degree in math to teach elementary math, but you should have like an actual math methods course of how to communicate, these math ideas to our young students.
We were talking a lot in this conversation about the trade-off that Black parents have to make. And I think a lot of parents have to make the same trade-off, parents of color. But one of the trade-offs might be, and this is going to be a gross generalization about schools, but you might end up, if you move to certain areas, if you do well in life and you move to certain areas, your kid might end up in a more knowledge-rich environment where they are studying complex text, and it's expected of them, and it's not seen as something that anybody's going to get out of doing because you don't like it or because you whatever. It's what we do here. We do at this school, we do Shakespeare, and we love it. Which I just want to be really honest with you. We're going to come back to this really quick, because Shakespeare's some boring shit. But I just actually, and I don't think that it's relevant, and it's culturally all that it's said to be or whatever. I have a problem with it. I have a bad attitude. Anyways, well, let me stick with this for a second, because it does deal with the trade-off. I don't think that necessarily putting a kid into a school where they're going to do Moby Dick and Shakespeare and Socrates and what are considered to be the great Western text with a few Asian texts sprinkled in, a few, little Toni Morrison here or there, little spice. Let's put a little spice and we're going to do some Maya Angelou for half a day somewhere, whatever. I do think that's part of the trade-off, though, because if you're saying I'm going to send my kids to these schools where the teachers believe that they can do well, and the teachers are prepared, they have in subject area background, like they have background in their subject area, whatever. But they're going to have to do all this Western canon stuff. Versus these schools over here where they're going to be listening, to hip hop, and they're going to have teachers that are reading hip hop books on the weekend, thinking that they can relate to students, and all the kids are going to go to jail. Well, I mean, if these are your two, I got to put my kid into mental slavery with the Western canon, or I got to put them in literal slavery with, with some really good Afrocentric reading from white teachers who spent a weekend studying Netflix documentaries or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a choice to have to make.
Yep.
Couldn't there be something else?
Yeah. I mean, the Western canon is not just, I'm going to, what everyone says, old dead white guys. It's not just that. But again, if you only take 4 classes in order to get your bachelor's degree, that's pretty much all you're going to read. And so that's not my experience with it. And any curriculum that doesn't have and show lots of different perspectives, it's not a good curriculum. So even though it might, heavily feature the Socrates and, the Moby Dick or whatever, if that's all kids are reading for, from 6th grade to 12th grade is that stuff, that's really unbalanced curriculum. And so the fight there isn't teach complex text. It's, hey, maybe update your teacher's content knowledge and their expertise in, other areas of great literature, not just a sprinkle in of Toni Morrison, but understanding how pivotal she is to, I mean, she's still pivotal now, but especially, from when she first started writing. And a lot of teachers don't have that knowledge either.
Did you read Beloved?
I haven't read that one yet. I'm familiar with it. I read some pieces when I was doing some teacher practicum when I was doing my teacher program, but I've read Sula, I've read Bluest Eye, I've also read the Song of Solomon now.
I actually tried to be woke for a minute, and I haven't read much Toni Morrison, and I'm not going to cry about it, but I tried it out. So Beloved was the one that I picked up because it was the craziest movie I had ever seen. And Lordy, that book is something. I don't know what to call it exactly. Don't feel like it has a period in it. It feels like the opening paragraph is 80 sentences long with no punctuation.
That's how she writes, though. And
I don't want anybody writing like that.
That is complex text. Some teachers would struggle to read that. And so imagine you're trying to just be culturally relevant or whatever. So it's I'm just going to have my kids read Toni Morrison and Choice Circle novels. Just there are adults who struggle to read this. How do you think a kid who's 16 or 17 is going to be able to get through it on their own? And so again, it's that lack of content knowledge is one, then also pedagogical knowledge of how to teach a kid to get through that. I also, if the first book you're going to read of Toni Morrison is Beloved, I wouldn't start there. You got to build your way up.
Okay. That's a bigger exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't jump into that part. Well, I mean, hell, everything having to do with Shakespeare is jumping in the deep end of the ocean because it's old text, old language. This is one thing I don't understand. I'm glad I got an English teacher on this morning because I get to ask things that I really want to know, not just what other people want to know. And maybe this is already done. One of my favorite Bibles to read is the New Version Bible. The Bible today that puts things in really common language. That you don't have to deal with the thou arts. Thou art nots, all that. You can just deal with the meaning and actually get to it. First of all, I would ask you, is that a problem to you? And second of all, can we do that with Shakespeare? Can we just get rid of the thou arts and doths and all that stuff and put it into regular language? Do we have to read? It almost feels like writing in cursive, but just in the reading form.
If you're not reading the original Shakespeare and you're just reading an updated form, then you're not reading the Shakespeare and you're not getting the practice in reading original text. And so, the thou arts and the chants, like whatever, like you get used to reading them. In my Shakespeare course that I took in college, we read 12 Shakespeare plays in one semester. And it took about 6 after reading 6 plays before I could just read them on my own. And so
it was clicking in your head. You didn't have to okay. What's your favorite of the Shakespeare plays? Which one's your favorite?
Oh man.
Yeah, pick one.
I actually really love King Lear.
Okay, so let's take King Lear. What's important about King Lear? I send my kid to you. What's important about it? What are they going to walk away with that makes them better equipped for the world from King Lear?
Okay, I'm going to switch back to Hamlet because I just remember loving King Lear. I don't remember all the.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Hamlet. Me too. I just don't remember. I remembered. I read it. I totally read it.
Othello. I'll talk about Othello because Othello has a Black character.
Okay.
Right. And so it is a Black character written by a white man. And so there's like some
played by white actors.
Played by white actors.
On their faces.
Yes. And we talk about that. We talk about staging. And throughout the play, Othello kind of goes through this. He deals with like internalized racism because he's the only Black person, in the whole play. And he's like kind of an outsider. And so we talk about like what it might feel like to be like an outsider in a place and like how you're navigating your own self in that. And so like there are other books that obviously talk about that theme, but those people that are writing that text in a contemporary sense have also read Othello. And so they're building on that tradition and like what Shakespeare did then. And so I value the tradition of English of reading older texts because everything is built upon them. And so I'm not saying like my kids have to study 6 different Shakespeare plays throughout high school, but to go through English and never having read anything by him, I think that's a disservice to students and to my field.
If I said to you, I'm going to challenge you as a college course to create an entire canon of non-white authors that give the same rich context to the world, do you think it can be done?
I'm also taking in like how old Shakespeare is. So I don't know if I have any texts from like the 1600s written by
like Asian,
they're not white,
Asian or Egyptian or Moroccan folks from.
And I don't know. You probably could do it,
yeah.
But I don't have that expertise because that's not what I studied. And that's why when I talk about the canon, it's not just like the canon. Like there's the African American literature canon. There's the Black liberation literature canon. Like it depends what you study, what you know. And my expertise is African American literature, post-colonial literature. Black feminist literature. That's kind of where my expertise is. But I also got the traditional, like I got the Shakespeare, I got the Francis Bacon, I got the Socrates and all that too.
See, this is where I think people like to show themselves and try and pretend they're something that they're not. Ray Ankrum is in our timeline talking about Toni Morrison is the GOAT. Ray, you ain't never read no Toni Morrison. I know you, bro. Just stop it. Just stop it. He's
not wrong.
I don't know, but he hasn't touched Toni Morrison's book. He's saying he is, but we're gonna find out later because I'm gonna give him a little standardized test on it. We're gonna figure. So Heather Harding makes a point here. I didn't read Morrison until I was in undergrad. So, but for sure there are many great young. God, why does she mean by yay authors of color? Young adult authors of color. Are there? Is there literature for that middle group of kids?
I'm not going to disparage authors of color, but if you're writing a young adult novel, you're writing it so that students don't have to do a lot of work to read it.
Oh, wow.
They are more simplistic, and that's by design because you're writing for that audience. And the point of reading a young adult book is so like, I don't have to try to figure out what this symbol means. It's like, they're telling me that, I'm in there's this character in their room listening to Kendrick Lamar. And it's like, that's the pull. because it's so cool, because it's like, oh my God, I listen to Kendrick Lamar too.
Mhm.
And so it's very like in a particular moment rather than like something that I don't think it's worth spending time on in my classroom because they can read it on their own.
I actually feel like a lot of the POC, BIPOC, African American focused things that are aimed at our kids are often, how do I say this in a way where I don't sound Negropean?
That's what I was worried about too. I'm just like, how do
Yeah,
I?
a lot of them have created an idea of who the Black kid is and what they should care about in the
Yep.
world that's limited and that's limiting. So, I have boys, if we just look at the universe of things that they could read, it gets into really stuff about space and, whatever, just imagining a world of like, being someday really being interested in astronomy or something. But a lot of the BIPOC people of color is struggle literature. And you may not have a struggle child. I don't know how to put this in ways that people aren't going to eat me up in the comments, but not all our children are struggle children. Let me give you an example of this. A couple years ago,
What you mean.
Killer Mike told us to move our money to Black banks a few years ago. I had already done that because I've been working on Black bank projects, not in total, but making sure that I spread my money around or whatever. And when in that call, I spread even more. I opened up an account with One United, which is a national Black bank that anybody can sign up for. They even had one of their credit cards had Black Panther on it. So I was like, yeah, we doing this, right? They had like a Black Lives Matter-ish protest card and stuff like that. But what I noticed over time was a lot of what they were sending me in terms of offers were all struggle offers, like, a secured credit card or a struggle loan when you can't get one with too high interest and these other things. And I got to thinking, who do you think your demographic really is 100%? And what do you think about your own people that you think everybody needs struggle credit, And when it comes to literature, that's the point that I'm trying to make here is, my daughter came and asked me once, Dad, how come Black people can't go to libraries again? And I remember like thinking, what the hell is she talking about and whatever? And she had just read a book that was about Black kids getting kicked out of libraries back in the day. It was an updated book with pictures of what segregation used to be like. And, it got me to thinking, so many of her books are about basketball, hip hop.
Being shot by the police.
What's that?
Slavery. I said being shot by the police and slavery.
Slavery, struggle, whatever. And we might have a happy, buoyant, bright kid of color who has not yet been stained by all that. And we get to make the decision of when we are going to introduce them to something other than just the creative literature, like creative stuff, think creatively. It sounds like you're agreeing with me, though. So you're not just agreeing with me that is kind of an issue, but you're probably agreeing with me also that even if, as we talk about that, we could be targets for talking about it that way. Because maybe people think we should have hip hop and basketball as our main books.
They can read it on their own time if they want to. But in my classroom, I think it's better to teach things that maybe they're not familiar with, to expand, what they know and to show them like the world is bigger than your backyard. For me, growing up on the North Side, like what else would I have known if I didn't have books to teach me that? So I didn't read, of course we read books about slavery because, that's school, but it's like, I wasn't just stuck reading books about Kendrick Lamar. We did Shakespeare, we did, we read Their Eyes Are Watching God, which is not a struggle book. That's just about a book about a Black woman finding herself. So I'm not going to say like, don't bring in Black authors, but also just realize that Black people are more than just those sad kind of, I'm like, we just getting shot by the police all the time. And also if you live that every day, necessarily, why are you going to make them sit through it again in the classroom? I wrote about that when I was writing about the George Floyd thing. It's just like, I could teach about it, but it's a lot to do that in front of my kids because I see a sea of brown faces and I'm just like, it's like, let us dream, just kind of try to imagine a world where, we just get to be people. And that's kind of it's a positive outlook rather than just kind of catering to the negative. And you, I mean, you know, I don't know if that's just my outlook on literature, at least. Again, like, read the basketball books if you want, but I'm not going to teach that in my class.
I mean, I appreciate that though, because I'm trying to raise my kids to be free people and freer than I was. I'm not trying to help them identify that the struggle is who they are. It may be something they have to do or participate in the world and in the real world. It's not who they are and who God intended them to be. My daughter's an artist, very much so. You know, I've got one kid that's developing the basketball love that many of us went through. I have another one that's kind of a blurred. You know, he's into the graphic stuff and you know, his 3D printer and all that. And I just want them to pursue any of that they want, but I want there to be literature that supports those different, you know, things. I don't want to like go to a library and say, oh, here's the African American section of it. Okay. And here's the section of the African American literature that isn't based on some form of struggle or hip hop or basketball as the main thing. But I say that too, and this might be somewhere where you can help too a little bit. Like, so I have one of the boys is now taken to saying, I don't like reading, just proudly, and whoo, oh my God, you want to talk about an arrow through the heart as me specifically, like, you know, me specifically. And I love my children too much to respond the way to them sometimes that God probably wants me to respond to them in that moment, but I let it go, you know, but he's been saying it more and more and more. And I fell into this, listen to this, Jasmine, I fell into well, I mean, have you read anything about like basketball? Since he goes out every day and he practices basketball every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, have you thought about maybe reading some of the theories of the plays and all that? And of course, he already has. Of course, he's already been online. He reads quick stuff, though, not books. He reads how do you do a crossover and all that type of stuff, whatever. But that was my kind of giving up on it, was just like, hey, maybe if I can just get him to read something that he's interested in, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's, when you're talking about reading for pleasure, that's what it should be. It's like, what I read Toni Morrison for pleasure because that's the taste that my teachers developed in high school. Like, those are the difficult stuff. But in the classroom, it shouldn't be just like, okay, what do you like? That's what I'm going to try to make you, you know, make it so that you're happy in the classroom. That's not how I see my job. My job is to say like, hey, here's something that you might not like, but life is full of stuff that you're going to have to do where you're not going to like it, but I'm going to teach you how to get through it. There's so much stuff that I had to do this past year that I didn't want to do, that I didn't like, that I was unhappy to do. And it was just part of my job. This is what you have to do. And when I was done, I told that to my students. I was like, do you guys understand how I felt about having to do this? And they were like, what? We didn't know. And I was like, it's part of being an adult, is doing things that you don't like. Mm-hmm. And so there's some character development in, you know, going through a class and being like, this book is boring. But if he just wants to read a book about basketball, I don't care.
At home,
sure. Yeah. Or during like sustained silent reading, if you have that in your school. Like, I do not care what kids read on their own time. But in my classroom, I'm not going to read something that automatically caters to your interest. I'm going to find something that might be a little bit outside. And I'm going to, like how I said, build upon what you know, and then show you how this book kind of expands upon that idea.
Mm. I know we're wrapping soon, but how did this happen so differently for you? I mean, you said you grew up on the north side of Minneapolis. People who don't live in Minneapolis don't know that the north side is probably the part of town, to the extent that Minneapolis has a Black area. The north side of Minneapolis has been considered that, even though it's I think it's 50-50 on the north side. But many of the schools in North Minneapolis are very Black, very poor. The expectations, I think, for the students are deeply discounted. I mean, they're lower than they should be. How did it happen differently for you? That you came out this Shakespeare reading, you know, internet goddess of the pedagogical world. How'd that happen?
I feel like it was luck. That's it.
Really luck.
Yep. I got lucky. And that's why I teach the way that I do, just because it shouldn't take luck to get a good education. And so that's why I fight for the things that I do, because I'm like I said, like, I'm not some like exceptional person where it's like Jasmine was just a genius. I was just a regular kid going to regular public schools. I just happened to have teachers that believed that I could. And so that's that's it. And that's why I do what I do.
You know, you also happen to be a go-to teacher, Black teacher, focused on our kids doing well or whatnot, who isn't, I think people can hear it through this entire conversation, who isn't wrapped up in the woke stuff. And I hate to call it the woke stuff because
it sounds so pejorative.
It does, again, and I don't want to like do the Negro peeing thing. Like the message behind the woke stuff to me is real. There is racism in the United States. It is systemic. It is baked into the systems. It's possibly permanent. And Derek Bell told us that it wasn't possibly permanent. He told us it is permanent. So what's behind the woke stuff, but it's the over woke stuff, I guess, that gets to me. Like when you start talking about minor issues rather than can you teach, damn it.
Yep.
I don't know where that came from with you though, because it seems like many of us that go to the same colleges that maybe you went to come out the other end with the over woke stuff.
I was over woke.
Oh, you were?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And
probably 2 years ago. I mean, that I was the person who's like, let the kids read the basketball books, like, because they just need to be interested, all of that stuff. And then I actually read about what it means to be an effective teacher. And it kind of changed my mind. And the longer that I'm in here, the more I realize that the overwoke stuff is not going to move the needle because it doesn't address the core issue of instruction. And Toni Morrison said that she was like, as long as racism is profitable, it's going to exist. And so if you're trying to rid your school of racism, it's not going to happen. But again, it's easier to do take a picture of your teachers sitting in circles talking about white fragility than it is to admit like, hey, our teachers aren't totally equipped with the pedagogical tools. That's why I talk about the low-hanging fruit in that Ed Week article. Graduation rates is a low-hanging fruit. Getting books with brown people on them, low-hanging fruit. It's a lot harder to talk about what's being done with those books and what that high school diploma actually means. Your point in that is saying that we can't base an entire movement on the things that seem low-hanging. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have to do some of the tougher discussions. Do you think those tougher discussions around how to teach, what to teach, putting a focus on pedagogy or whatnot is one that we can win with, I was about to say with white teachers, but I mean, so many are so focused on the low-hanging fruit and they're almost insulted when you come for them on the other stuff. It's almost like you're insulting them by saying that there may be a deficit in their teaching, not just in their caring. Yeah, I mean, for me, it doesn't matter. Like, if there's something that I'm not doing well, it's not a personal thing. It's just like, I just haven't learned how to do it yet. Almost when I teach my kids, I'm like, you're not dumb. You just haven't learned how to do it yet. And I'm going to teach you how to do it. And then they're like, yeah, you right. And so teachers need to have an open mind. Like, you can ask any teacher if they learned how to do their job in their teaching program, and they're going to say no. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know anyone who just learned everything. For people who haven't been through that pathway, and I know we got to wrap, but there's so much to ask you, Jasmine. We have to have you back. You just got my mind racing on so many things. Do you think that's true across the board? Are there some stellar college programs where they are coming out like ready to go and teaching, and it's just the fact that we have some really low quality ones in the field, but there are some, maybe if your program has like a year-long placement, maybe like Relay GSE, but then those aren't, that's not by the traditional colleges. It's not as highly looked upon because it's alternative. So that's a whole nother thing too. That's true. Okay, you coming back for sure. We're gonna have Jasmine Lane back. For people who've been watching, this is educator, author, extraordinary pedagogical warrior, Jasmine Lane. You can find her on Twitter at Miss Jasmine MN, and that's from Minnesota because Minnesota is exporting a whole bunch of potent stuff to y'all right now. Y'all better recognize. Including Chris Stewart, Nikemi Livy-Pounds, Kulia Pringle. Then we had Josh Crossan on a show not too long ago, and we got Jasmine Lane today. We are doing it in Minnesota, just so y'all know. Please get in touch with Jasmine online if you want to hear more, and please read the work that she does. Her pieces are thoughtful, provoking,
and I think on point. They're pointing us in the right direction that we should go. Jasmine, any final words that you want to leave with people with? I asked you the question about what war do you want to win in education? And I feel like that could be a whole nother show if you really thought about it for a while. But are there any that I asked you about one, are there any others that you think, man, we've got to get over some of these humps, specific to what you care about?
What I'm going to work on more next year is helping or making sure that the parents of the students that I serve, that they feel like I'm their partner. So I feel like a lot of times maybe parents feel like schools are kind of adverse to them, or like they're cast aside, like what they think doesn't matter. It can't influence things. And it does. So if you're a parent who cares, which is the most of our parents, you have a voice and it matters more than you think. So use that voice to advocate for your kids.
Well, let me know how I can help with that one. That's what I care about most. Like the parent teacher or the school home relationship to me, I think I'm ready to talk more about. I'm ready to think more about. So Jasmine, thank you so much. And to everybody who watched and listened, man, here you guys go again with these great comments. I'm going to read them all after the show today, see what I could have asked better or done better. But I thank you all. You make the show better every day. Please share it with others, because that's the way this thing grows. Jasmine, this was one of our most watched shows. I could tell the numbers while we were discussing. So people, it may make you feel better that people really do care about teaching and learning and pedagogy as one of the most important things to work on. So you're doing it. Thank you.